leading off our discussion tonight are two Democratic members of Congress from the great state of California, Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Congressman Ted Lieu. Thank you both very much for coming to the last word. Congressman Lieu, tonight, Chairman Benny Thompson said that the Select Committee could ask Mike Pence to appear before the committee this month. Your thoughts, should he?
I absolutely think that anyone who has relevant information should provide it to the committee, and that includes Mike Pence. He clearly was targeted by supporters of the former president. They wanted to hang him, and he had information about where he was that day and the threats that he was facing. So if he can provide relevant information, I think he absolutely should provide it. And we also want to know, did he communicate with the former president that day? And if so, what did they discuss?
Congresswoman Lee, you told the Lily that January 6th has focused you on passing voting rights legislation. Why is that?
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Nice to be with you and my colleague tonight. Well, first of all, we see what's taking place and what culminated January 6th, just in terms of the efforts of the insurrectionists who almost thwarted the peaceful transfer of power in an attempted coup. And so it's extremely important that we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, because let me tell you, what is taking place around the country now in terms of gerrymandering, in terms of them electing elected officials who would not provide for access to our constitutional rights to vote, but they're trying to subvert millions of people's right to vote. It's extremely important because our democracy is at stake, and I see what they're doing in terms of their move toward autocratic government and a system that would not allow for the democracy that we all know so well.
Mm-hmm. Congressman Lieu, we know that the Select Committee hasn't ruled out a criminal referral against Donald Trump. What do you think are the next steps in the committee's investigation?
Well, let me first say that Congresswoman Lee is absolutely right that we have to get voting rights signed into law. And with regard to the question you asked initially on your show, where do you go from here? I want to note that 147 Republican members of Congress, even after the assault on our Capitol, voted to nullify the presidential election. So we need to make sure that they don't return to office this November and vote them out at the ballot box. And then in terms of any criminal referrals, if the evidence and facts are there and the House Select Committee determines that there should be criminal charges, then they absolutely have the right to make that referral to the Department of Justice. It will only be a recommendation. It will be up for the Department of Justice to then decide if they want to go forward with an investigation or with any charges.
Congresswoman Lee, let me come back to you on voting rights, because as you were speaking, I remembered that the president and the vice president are going to Georgia next week. They're going to be giving speeches on voting rights. In the last hour, Ali just had on Insay Ufot, who's been a guest on this show, talking about a piece that she and other leaders in Georgia wrote, where they said to the president, don't come down here if you don't have a plan. Are you satisfied that the Biden administration, that President Biden has a plan to get done what you and all of us are saying needs to get done? The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act has to get passed.
I think we heard yesterday the president come forward very forcefully and talk about the fact that we have got to pass this and we've got to pass these two bills right away. I support ending the filibuster. The president very clearly said we've got to do something. And that means if we don't have, and we see we don't have any Republican votes, we need to find a carve out, a way around so that we can protect our democracy. It's very fragile right now. It withstood the test of time on January 6th, but it's still fragile. And so we have to do this. And I'm confident that the president is going to fight very hard, just like we are, to make sure that these bills get passed. But we have to make sure that the groundswell and the movement and the people out there who are pushing the grassroots movement push very hard so that these members of the Senate listen and hear and hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm. Congressman Lieu, yesterday I interviewed Chairman Thompson on Washington Post Live, and I asked him, are you going to subpoena Congressman Jim Jordan and Congressman Scott Perry? His answer was, well, we're looking to see if we have the authority. Congressman Lieu, do you think that the committee has the authority to subpoena them? And if so, should they?
The committee absolutely has that authority because in America, no one is above the law, including members of Congress. So if the committee believes that there's information that these members of Congress can provide that would be relevant, then the committee actually has the power to issue the subpoena. I also note that, unfortunately, what we've seen is because of delays in litigating these subpoenas, last 4 years have shown that the Trump administration was able to render many of these subpoenas meaningless because of the length of these delays. I'm on the House Judiciary Committee, and Don McGahn, a former White House counsel, chose to litigate the subpoena, and it took over 2 years. Although we won, we only got him in 2 years later. And so we need to make sure that these folks don't run out the clock, which is why I think we have to pass my legislation on the inherent contempt bill, which would allow Congress to enforce our own subpoenas.
Congressman Ted Lieu, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, thank you both very much for joining us tonight.